Victoria Sinclair had built her reputation on making difficult decisions without hesitation. As the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, she believed people either performed or they didn't. Excuses never impressed her, and emotions certainly didn't influence her judgment. That same attitude followed her everywhere, including toward her personal driver, Ethan Marsh, a quiet widowed single father who had spent nearly a year driving her between meetings without ever asking for recognition. Ethan rarely spoke unless spoken to. He arrived early, kept the vehicle spotless, opened every door with quiet professionalism, and disappeared into the background once each trip ended. To Victoria, that silence looked like a lack of confidence. That evening, after another exhausting board meeting, Victoria climbed into the back seat, frustration already building after a disagreement with investors. Halfway through the drive, traffic came to a sudden stop because of an accident ahead. Ethan calmly chose an alternate route instead of forcing the luxury sedan into the congestion. Victoria looked up from her tablet. "Who told you to change the route? The main road is blocked," Ethan answered respectfully. "This will get us there faster. I didn't ask you to think for me." Ethan remained silent. Minutes later, they arrived safely outside the company's headquarters. Victoria stepped out, turned toward him, and made a decision she believed was long overdue. "I need someone who shows initiative and confidence. You're too passive for this position." She held out her hand. "Give me your company ID." Ethan looked at the badge hanging from his jacket, unclipped it, and placed it in her hand without argument. "If that's your decision, ma'am, I wish you the best." There was no anger, no pleading, no attempt to defend himself. That almost irritated Victoria even more. She watched him walk toward the employee parking area, carrying only a small backpack that held his lunch container, a worn notebook, and a framed photograph of his 8-year-old son. The picture was the first thing he checked every morning before starting work. Unknown to Victoria, Ethan had accepted the driving job after leaving military service years earlier. He wanted a quiet life away from violence, somewhere his son could grow up without fearing another midnight deployment. He had promised himself he would never fight again unless there was absolutely no other choice. Inside the shadows across the street, another group had been watching for hours. 3 masked kidnappers communicated through hidden earpieces while a fourth waited inside a black SUV with its engine already running. "The driver is gone," one whispered. "The CEO is alone. Move." The revolving glass door suddenly burst open. Employees screamed as the masked men rushed forward. One grabbed Victoria's wrist before she could react. Another pointed a suppressed handgun toward the crowd. "Nobody move." Panic exploded through the entrance lobby. People dropped briefcases and scattered in every direction. Security guards inside the building reached for their radios, but the attackers had chosen the exact moment when most of the protection team was changing shifts. Victoria struggled desperately. "Let me go." The leader shoved her toward the waiting SUV. No witnesses. Ethan heard the scream before he reached his pickup. He slowly turned. Years of training took over before conscious thought could. He counted automatically. 3 visible attackers, 1 getaway driver, 1 hostage, several terrified civilians trapped between them. He noticed the handgun was aimed carelessly toward fleeing employees. One frightened mistake from the gunman could kill innocent people. Ethan took a slow breath. He removed his suit jacket and folded it neatly over the hood of his truck. Then he loosened his tie. The nearest kidnapper noticed him. "You," the man shouted. "Keep walking if you want to live." Ethan didn't answer. His posture changed so subtly that almost nobody noticed except Victoria. The nervous, quiet chauffeur, who had spent months opening car doors, suddenly stood with perfect balance. His eyes locked on every threat at once. There was no panic on his face, only complete focus. The kidnapper raised his pistol and fired. Before anyone could even process the sound, Ethan exploded into motion. In less than 2 seconds, he moved off the line of fire, redirected the gunman's arm away from the crowd, and struck the weapon free before it could fire another round. Using the attacker's momentum, he slammed him into the marble column hard enough to remove him from the fight. The remaining kidnappers froze for the briefest instant. Their target had never been the quiet driver, but now they realized the quiet driver was the most dangerous man standing outside that building. Ethan didn't waste a second after dropping the first attacker. He knew professional kidnappers never worked alone, and hesitation was often deadlier than bullets. The second masked man reached for the compact rifle hanging across his chest, but Ethan was already moving. He seized the man's arm, twisted it sharply, forcing the weapon toward the empty pavement instead of the terrified employees. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the ground before Ethan struck the attacker with a precise elbow, knocking him unconscious. The third kidnapper abandoned Victoria and sprinted toward the waiting SUV, pulling another handgun from beneath his jacket. The driver inside the vehicle slammed his foot on the accelerator, intending to ram Ethan and recover his team before security arrived. "Ethan!" Victoria shouted. Without looking back, Ethan grabbed the dropped rifle and rolled behind a concrete support pillar. As the SUV sped toward him, the vehicle smashed through decorative barriers, scattering stone and glass across the entrance. Employees screamed and ducked for cover. Ethan remained calm. His breathing never changed. He watched the driver's hands, the vehicle's speed, and the narrowing distance. At the last possible moment, he stepped aside. The SUV missed him by inches and crashed into a reinforced security barrier that had automatically risen to protect the entrance. The impact disabled the vehicle before it could escape. The surviving kidnapper stumbled from the wreck, still clutching his hand handgun. He fired wildly toward the building, endangering everyone nearby. Ethan knew there was no room for another mistake. He advanced with controlled precision, using the concrete columns as cover. The gunman squeezed the trigger again, but before he could fire another shot, Ethan closed the distance, redirected the weapon safely away from the crowd, and forcefully ended the threat. The final attacker collapsed, unable to continue the assault. Silence settled over the entrance. Only the sound of alarms and approaching police sirens filled the air. Within moments, tactical officers surrounded the area, secured the attackers, and began checking employees for injuries. One senior officer walked toward Ethan, stopping just a few feet away before offering a respectful nod. "I thought you'd disappeared for good." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I promised my son I'd leave that life behind." The officer looked at the unconscious kidnappers, then back at Ethan. "Looks like that promise lasted until innocent lives needed protecting." Victoria stood speechless. Just 20 minutes earlier, she had dismissed him as an ordinary chauffeur who lacked confidence. Now she understood the silence she had mistaken for weakness had actually been discipline. The patience she had criticized had come from years of surviving situations where panic meant death. She slowly walked toward him, holding the company ID she had taken from him. "I made a terrible mistake," she said quietly. "I judged you without knowing who you really were." Ethan looked at the badge but didn't take it immediately. "You judged what you could see," he replied. "Most people do." Victoria's voice trembled. "Please come back. Not because you saved my life, but because today you reminded me that character is worth more than appearances." Ethan thought about his son waiting at home, about the peaceful life he wanted, and about the danger that seemed determined to find him. Anyway, he finally accepted the badge with a small smile. "I'll come back," he said, "but only on one condition." "What is it?" "You never measure another person's worth by their job title again." Victoria nodded without hesitation. "I won't." From that day forward, the company changed. Every employee, from the janitor to the executives, received the same respect. And every time someone asked why the CEO treated everyone equally, she would remember the quiet driver she had fired, only to discover that behind his humble smile was the courage of a warrior and the heart of a devoted single father.